I'd like to invite questions, and I'd like to ask our speakers to come stand forward. When you ask those questions, what I will request is that you speak very, very loudly, perhaps even, if you wouldn't mind, coming to the side here when you're acknowledged to ask the question, just so that we can record it, because we would like to record the whole session today to the best that we can. So please, for questions, would somebody like to nominate first? And would the next person that'd like to ask a question just come around behind Rod? I'm sorry to make you exercise, but it's probably good for you.
Hi, it's Rod Bauer. Rod Bauer from Socoa, co-convener with Jay Christie. Welcome everybody here, and thank you, Marion and Cathy. My question is about how we organise to deal with these sorts of things. Often throughout the free thought movement, we talk about herding cats and getting, not the inability of our groups to work together or to agree on how we should tackle these things, and our ineffectiveness really in lobbying. And we look at the ACL and groups like that and think, my God, how do we fight against that sort of thing? Very aware of what you've written about the Uniting Church having strong secular views, and that was my experience. I'd just like to know what's happening in the Christian community that you're aware of. Are there groups, organised groups, pushing this secular thing, and can we work with them, or are what I would call progressive Christian groups or moderate Christian groups in as big a mess as we are as far as pushing back against the ACL?
It's a very good question. Groups that incline to authoritarianism have it all over the rest of us when it comes to organising. But on the other hand, I mean, the groups like the ACL are as good at lobbying as they are because they learnt from the social movements of the 1960s. They looked at the progressive organisations of the 60s and deliberately modelled themselves on those. So it's not like progressive groups haven't done it before. I think progressive groups have to reclaim, first of all, their vision and their determination, and just be ready to, first of all, to compromise, which obviously you have shown that you are by having me along, and be clear about what it is that we need to achieve. And part of that is identifying what the problem is and being clear, like as Cathy was so strong in saying, it's not about saying religion is a bad thing necessarily. It's about saying religion is not an appropriate thing to be used in a doctrinal way in public schools. That has to be the message, having a clear idea of what it is that we're saying and working out what are the campaigns that you can win. And look, there are Victorians here who are about to win, or maybe they have won, maybe they haven't quite, but they're about to succeed on the very important issue of SRI in public schools. That's a campaign that has been tirelessly prosecuted by Lara and Scott and is on the brink of success. So, and Firus or Firus or Faris, or however we say it, has set up a model that we can all learn from, of an internet presence, local groups, relentless political pressure, and being able to have a single message and staying right on message. So, I mean, it's not a new idea, it's just the things that lobby groups always know. As regards what is happening in, your question to me was about what's happening in church organisations. I mean, I think Virus, as I call them, might have been a bit disappointed with progressive church support, but there has been some for that campaign. My sense is that progressive church organisations are feeling as much under pressure and hammered as everybody else in progressive movements, and sort of tottering a bit at the moment. But once they sense that there are other people who want to work with them, you know, people build each other up on these things. That's the best I can tell you on that. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I'll add just one thing. What I've noticed with some different groups that seem to have similar agendas, when they get stuck on a particular word or issue and they start attacking each other on the same side of the long-term goal, it is entirely unhelpful. And the word that Marion mentioned of compromise is the only way forward. And so attacking each other is just not going to work. And so the only suggestion I might add to that conversation is you've got to learn how to get over yourselves a little and be okay with, you know, maybe it's not entirely how you feel, but if it's for the bigger picture, then let's go.
Thank you. My name is Nathan. I'm a teacher myself, and I wanted to tease out, if I could, what you referred to as the difference between policy and practice. Now, before I lost my faith, I worked at a Christian non-denominational school for 10 years. And this relates to the incursion of religion into the curriculum rather than into religious instruction specifically. Our school had a teaching of origins statement that explicitly rejected young earth creationism, and I thought that was a very wise thing to do. And in my research, I can point to fairly clear, fairly explicit, and fairly recent statements from 3 state departments of education, South Australia, New South Wales, and since you mentioned Queensland, in October of last year, Queensland's State Department of Education said that the Australian curriculum requires students to study the theory of evolution. The department does not recognise as a scientific theory creationism, intelligent design, or any metaphysical explanation of changes over time to living things. And then it pointedly says that school principals will ensure school programs implement the curriculum as specified. And that, of course, is the new national curriculum, because schools are in a state of transition between state-based and a new national curriculum. Now, given these fairly clear statements...
Sorry to interrupt, that's been taken down from the Queensland Education Department's website.
That's a curious development. So if that statement is now missing, I wonder whether perhaps these incidences that we hear of creationism being taught is a fringe phenomenon, and given that these statements have been made, whether it's more a question of enforcement or whether there's something more systemic or cultural going on.
A couple of answers on that. When South Australia brought in a statement in 2010 saying that the department does not accept any literal interpretation of a religious text as, I forget the exact wording, scientific part of the science curriculum, the Christian Schools Australia, Australian Association of Christian Schools and Lutheran Schools jointly lobbied to have that statement removed and succeeded in having that statement removed. They were happy with the statement that went just before it, which said that the department insisted on teaching of science as an empirical, evidence-based discipline, but they weren't happy for the department to tell them what not to teach. What happens in many of the so-called new Christian schools is that evolution is taught as this is what you need to pass the exam, or this is the theory that's most widely recognised among scientists, and then now we'll teach you another one, which is what many Christians believe, or here's an alternative way of understanding. And in fact, the New South Wales science curriculum leaves room for, within the science curriculum, for alternative interpretations, which can include Indigenous dreaming stories or other sort of sources of ancient explanations. But in Christian schools that's interpreted as that's the space to do creationism, and I'd put it to you that it's taken with a heavier dose of literalism than now we're having the Indigenous spot in a public school is taken. And in the 1980s, the Bjelke-Petersen government briefly actually mandated creationism as part of the public school curriculum in Queensland, and I think Cathy might be going to tell us later about how there is still some overhang of that period in the Queensland public system. There are private schools in Australia that explicitly say on their websites our students are taught that God created the world in 6 days in the science curriculum, and then in the history curriculum they're taught the history of our Christian heroes, and in the literature curriculum they're taught also stories of Christian heroes, so you can imagine it's fairly limiting curriculum. Those are a minority of schools. Then there are ones that do teach evolution but teach it as for debunking, or you have to know about this because this is what is we're in an evolution saturated culture, one website that I found said. So they teach it to children but not with any intention that children would actually believe it. Once again, those are a minority of schools. But the thing that concerned me was that those umbrella organisations would immediately, go on the lobbying path to remove the South Australian statement that a literal interpretation of biblical text wasn't allowed to be included as a science standard. And that they get $800 million. Those three organisations between them account for $800 million a year of the Australian education budget.
Just on your point on policy versus practice and potential cultural influence, about a year ago I was at a forum similar to this, the Queensland Humanists, discussing things, and the Queensland Teachers Union representative talked about the value of having discussion in class and the value of critical thinking and therefore having children explore things. And this opens up the opportunity between policy and practice in terms of allowing the creationism in alongside evolution. And the Teachers Union representative gave a very strong, although I didn't take it for a moment, strong argument to present evolution alongside creationism and to have children discuss it. So that wasn't policy, it was a potential interpretation of the policy, and that would result in particular kinds of practice.
I would call that a Socratic pedagogy.
If you like.